Since we don't want to get caught, we plan ahead, are we crazy or what? We plan ahead, are we crazy or what?
Hi, I'm Bill with Self-Reliant School, and I just want to take a minute to show you a new canning accessory we got in. This is the Mom's Mason Jar Rack. It's designed to hold your canning jars in a hanging position. Now, most people do a setup like this. You've got your canning jars sitting on a shelf, and for most people, that's just fine. There are a few situations where that's less than ideal. If you live in any kind of area that is prone to earthquakes, and these days that's not just out on the California coast. Here in Dallas, Texas, we've had some minor earthquakes, and you get up just 100, 200 miles north up into Oklahoma, and they've had some pretty strong ones. So if your shelf, even if it's bolted to the wall, if you've got anything above just a minor tremble, your jars are going to come falling to the floor pretty easily. And then one other minor issue with a shelf unit is you're limited to the space between the shelves. And what I mean by that is, if you see here, we've got dead space between each of these, the tops of the canning jars and the shelf. Now the Mom's Mason Jar Rack is designed to eliminate the dead space. It gives you, lets you put the most cans in the smallest amount of space possible. You can use every inch of that space. And it also hangs them securely so they won't fall off even in all but the most violent earthquakes. So let's take a look at what we've got inside here. We'll open it up. Comes with a set of instructions. And the main part of the Mason Jar Rack is this little piece of carbon steel here. And as you can see here, there's a couple of lips, and what you do is you simply slide your mason jars in like that, and they hang like this. And you can fit up to 3 regular mouth mason jars in this one rack. Now, there's several ways that you can mount these racks. And you get the mounting hardware with the kit. So let's take a look at what we've got here. And there's one more piece in here that I'll show you. Okay, so like I said, there's several ways that you can mount this rack. So you'll notice there's 4 holes in the top of the rack, and you could mount it underneath a cabinet. Like if this was your cabinet, you just screw it up onto the cabinet itself. Now, if you don't want to mount it on a cabinet, if you want to mount several of them on a wall vertically, you're going to use this little bracket here. You'll mount this onto the wall, and then the mason jar rack will slide onto that. And there's several ways that you can mount this. If you're going straight into a stud, straight into wood, something that's really going to hold up, you can just use a regular wood screw and just go straight into there. But that's only going to be good if you're going into a really big solid wood wall, which is pretty unlikely, or if you're just doing a single row on a stud. So more than likely what you'll be doing is mounting it into a plasterboard wall, a hollow wall. And for that, they give you these hollow wall anchors. They're simple. They're the ones you would use for, say, hanging a picture or a towel bar or something like that. You simply, it's got a point on the end. You simply put it up against the plasterboard, tap it in, and screw it in. And then this piece here will expand and capture this in the wall. Now the drawback to this is each of these racks, or each of these brackets, has 4 holes. So you've got 4 holes per rack for every 3 jars. So say you get a lot of these things going, you're going to be putting a lot of holes in your wall. Instead, what you can do is mount it on a piece of pegboard. And to do that, they have these little plastic screws here. Let me see if I can give you a close-up shot of that. You have a plastic sort of bracket and then a screw, and as you tighten the screw, it forces these two teeth apart and widens it up so that it's held inside the pegboard. And so if you're using a piece of pegboard like this, you're pretty much unlimited as to how many of these you can mount, just as big a piece of pegboard as you want. So what I would suggest doing is you locate where you're going to mount these, and you cut a piece of pegboard to size, and we're going to mount the pegboard over the wall. So what you do is you're going to cut your pegboard to size. This is a small one just for demonstration purposes. And then on the back of it, I've just tacked on these 1x2, just cheap pine 1x2s. And that's going to do two things. It's going to keep it from flexing. It's pretty solid here, so it's not going to wiggle on you. And this is also how you're going to mount it to the wall. What you'll do is you'll mount the pegboard to the wall. You'll only need maybe about 4 to 6 screws to go into the wall, as opposed to 4 of these screws for every single rack. And what you can do is use these little butterfly hollow wall anchors. And the way these work is you have a hole here, and I simply drilled right through one of the pegboard holes, and I'm going to go ahead and insert the screw through that so that it's sticking out right through the middle of my 1x2. Then you're going to drill a little bit bigger hole into your plasterboard, and you're going to put this little spring clip in there. So what's going to happen is you'll push that through the plasterboard with it closed up like this. And once it gets through the plasterboard, it's going to pop open, and then you'll just tighten it up, and it will hold the pegboard up against the plasterboard. And that way, when it comes time to take it down, you'll only have 4, maybe 6 screw holes to fill up rather than dozens and dozens of them. Now, if you have a really big piece of pegboard, say 4 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet wide, you'll probably want to run another 1x2 somewhere in the middle, because it's going to get a little bit wiggly, a little flexible. So I would say run a vertical 1x2 like this about every 3 feet or so, and that'll keep this pegboard nice and strong. Now, as you can see, I've already got one bracket mounted here. I'm going to go ahead and mount the other bracket right next to it. They fit snugly next to each other, so you don't lose any of your pegboard space. You simply take one of your little clips, unscrew it a little bit so that you can squeeze the teeth together, and just insert it through the hole. Give it a good firm push down in there, and then do the same thing with the rest of the clips. And then it's simply a matter of screwing these down to lock this down. Now, they are pretty tight, so you gotta use a little bit of elbow grease, but I'll go ahead and screw all 4 of these into place. And that's it. Now, if I show you the back of this here, you can see that the clips have expanded out, so you're not gonna be able to pull them out by the weight of the jars. So at this point, we've got the 2 mounting plates on there, and you simply slide your jar rack onto there, just like that. Now, you can either go ahead and mount the pegboard on the wall first and put these on, or you can mount it on the ground, mount your brackets while the pegboard's on the ground, and then mount it to the wall, because these just come off and on. They're not bolted on, so you're not going to be having to lift a whole wall full of these. It's still pretty easy. So once you've got all the racks in place, you simply start sliding the jars in. We'll just grab 3 regular mouth jars here. Now, if you'll notice, I'm putting these in with the rings on because that's how they're stored here. Now, these are all dry canned. So it's just vacuum sealed essentially, so we can store it with the rings on. But anything here, you'll see, anything that we've water bath canned or pressure canned, store it with the rings off. And that goes for hanging it as well. The reason behind that is when you have the ring on, the seal can actually come loose, let some bacteria in, but then with the ring on, it keeps it a little bit tight, and so it's got the opportunity to reseal. So when it comes time to take the ring off, you don't know that it has sealed and resealed itself, and what's in here could be contaminated. But if the ring is actually off and the seal breaks loose, it'll stay loose. You won't get that vacuum suction sound when you pop it off, and you'll know that it wasn't a good seal. But like I say, if you're just canning stuff by vacuum, or not even necessarily vacuuming, if you're just putting it in the mason jar, you can store it with the ring on. Now, whether you've got the lids on or off and the rings on or off, the jar's stored the same. You can see here, there's a small little lip on the mason jar rack, and that is going to hold this lip here on the jar. So that slides right in there, and if you see, it's being held on that glass lip. It's not touching the top lid, so there's no chance of it pulling off. And then the same thing happens if you use a jar with a ring on it. It's still going to be held on that glass lip. It's not touching the ring or any other part. So it's not going to wiggle your ring loose. It's not going to pop your lid off. So there, I've got 3 mason jars hanging from my rack. They're pretty steady. Odds are they're not going to slide out here, but if you're worried that they might start to wiggle their way out, maybe you live on a second story, your floor is a little wiggly, you've got kids running around and it tends to shake this a little bit, then there's a hole up front here. You can just take a regular nail, drop it down in there, and that's going to stop the front jar from coming out. Even if you tilt it forward, it's not going to slide out on you. Now, I really like the fact that these attach to a pegboard, because I may not go ahead and do a whole wall full of these to replace our canning shelves, just not right at first. But I am going to go ahead and put some of these out on my workbench, which already has a pegboard wall. And I can see using these for all your little nails, screws, batteries, all those small parts that you just wind up throwing in a cardboard box or one of those little drawer divider gizmos that you buy from Home Depot. And this will keep everything a little bit better organized. So there you go. It's Mom's Mason Jar Rack by a company called Otter Lab. You can find them online at masonjarstorage.com, and I'll give you a link to that in the notes below. Take a look at them. Tell me what you think. And so take care, and I'll see you when it's time for our next review.